Good morning, everybody. Good morning, members. I am not in yet. I'm just working from Siraj's phone laptop at the moment. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. We are going to start the meeting just to ask everybody of the committee just to introduce themselves, and then we'll see if there's any apologies. I don't think we've received any apologies, but welcome, members. Can we just get, for the record, your attendance, please?
Okay, okay, here you go.
Good morning, everyone. Peter Johnson, member of this committee. Morning, Benedicta.
Morning, everyone. Benedicta van Minnen, member of this committee.
Morning, Mama French Mbombo, member of this committee.
Good morning, Pat Lecker, member of this committee.
Member Van Wyk, I didn't hear you yet. Member Van Wyk, Leon Van Wyk, are you with us?
Chairperson, Member Van Wyk did log on earlier this morning, and he did get it, Chair. But I think that is probably something wrong with his microphone.
No problem.
Good morning. Apologies, Member Leon Van Wyk. Yeah, I was just on a call in the meantime. Apologies for that.
No problem. Thank you very much. And then we can go over to the Audit Committee to introduce themselves and the Auditor General.
Good morning, members and everyone on the platform. I'm Blanche Cancross. I'm the Head of Internal Audit for Western Cape Government.
Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry, Comfort. I'm Francois Barnard. I'm Chairperson of the Governance, Innovation and Administration Cluster Audit Committee.
Good morning, members. My name is Comfort Bunting. I chair the Jobs Cluster Audit Committee.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. My name is Peter Strauss, and I am the chair of the Wellbeing Cluster.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is that everybody?
Yes, Chairperson, that's everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And with us is Mr. Dustin Davids, our coordinator.
Morning, Chairperson. Morning, colleagues.
Good morning. Good morning to you. Yes, I had problems logging in. I'm in now, so thank you very much to our very capable IT. Siraj, thank you very much. We're going to start with the audit committee, and I believe Ms. Okay, sorry, Ms. Davids, go over to you.
Chairperson, just to inform you that we've got the Auditor General as well in the meeting, Ms. Tasneem Adams and Ms. Sangeeta Callan.
Good morning, Chair. I've got with me Tasneem, Zini, and Sepo. So there's a few of us in terms of stakeholder liaison, but most of the presentation will happen from my side and from Tasneem. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Before we just commence, and like I said, we're going to start with the audit committee first. I think we're all familiar with the rules now. All members are to be muted at the beginning of the meeting to avoid background noises. And also, I'm asking members to flag points of order in the chat function. And if a person speaks, you can put on your audio and your microphone, switch it on if you speak. Don't have to, but it's just better for quality purposes. So we're going to try to do this session of the audit committee in the first hour. So I want to give half an hour for the briefing and then questions, and then we go over to the AG and do that half an hour so that we have enough time if members do have questions. I see Mr. Member Basil Pietrus is in the meeting. Your hand is up, Member Pietrus. Member Pietrus, can you hear me? You're still on mute. Member Peters, you're on mute. We can't hear you. Most probably you want to just greet and say that you're in the meeting. Is that what it is? If you can just give us, Member Peters, over to you.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, colleagues. Now, Chairperson, I ask for permission to apologize from this meeting because I have another engagement with the NCOP.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you're excused. No problem. No problem. Okay, Mr. Davids, is that everything that I needed to do? Is there anything else that we needed to do?
No, Chair. You are 100% Chair. You can
Thank you
continue,
very much.
Chair.
No, thank you very much. Can we go over to the Audit Committee to give us their presentation? Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. It's Blanche. I will take you through. Let me just share my screen. So I am gonna just do a brief introduction, and the focus will be on Part C, which is the governance section of the annual report. Under the introduction, it's just a brief overview of what is contained in the annual reports of departments, the fact that it is statutory and there's certain policy requirements for us to present information in an understandable and concise manner. But for purposes of this presentation, the focus will be particularly on Part C, governance, but more importantly, the internal and audit committee sections of that particular report. And I will also just explain why that particularly. So in Part C of the annual reports, there's a number of sections contained in it. The first part of it usually is under risk management, but the risk management portion gets completed by departments, and they are usually assisted with ERM that I refer to here as enterprise risk management. So risk management, the risk management function is centralized in the Corporate Services Center of .P, but they assist the departments to provide input in the annual report. And there's usually a description on the department's risk management and strategy, how the department conducts risk assessments for the period under review, whether in the department there's a risk management committee, and then feedback is also provided in the annual report on how the risk management committee advises management on the overall risk management and the mitigation. So the controls that they have in place to ensure that risks don't materialize. Also in the risk management portion of the annual report, it's whether the audit committee advises the department on risk management and whether the audit committee independently monitors the effectiveness of risk management. And you will see later in the presentation the role of the audit committee in terms of that. And then lastly, under risk management is also just progress that the departments give on how they manage risks. The next section, usually in the governance part of the annual report, is on fraud and corruption. And there again, the department completes it, but with the help of Provincial Forensic Services, which is also a shared function. And under fraud and corruption, they explain whether the department has a fraud prevention plan, but more importantly, whether that was implemented. They also report on mechanisms that the department has in place to report on fraud and corruption, and also, my apologies, lastly, under fraud and corruption is usually a list of or a table of cases that's being reported on and what action is being taken by the department. Then they also, under fraud and corruption, there's minimizing conflict of interest contained in there. I think it's actually a separate section. But under conflict of interest, it's again the process that is explained by the department that they follow in terms of that, and also whether particular areas of conflict of interest has been identified. The department reports on the code of conduct and the processes that they follow there, health, safety, and environmental issues. And then there's also a portion under the governance report on the portfolio committees, you know, the dates of the meetings and matters that's been raised by portfolio committees. And then there's also SCOPA resolutions contained in Part C, and there it's about the SCOPA meeting dates, the resolutions identified during a period under review, but more importantly also how the status of those resolutions and what the department has done to implement. We go to the next slide. And I'm trying to see why I can't move. My apologies. Next in the governance and Part C of the annual report is prior modifications to audit reports. And that is usually about mechanisms that the department has put in place to resolve issues raised by the Auditor General. And it's usually limited to matters that gave rise to the audit opinions and matters of non-compliance. And then there's also a brief explanation of the work done by the internal control unit of departments. So before I move to the next portion of in the governance report, which is on internal audit and the audit committees, I thought it's just prudent to give you some background in terms of the mandate of the audit committee, their composition, but also where they fit in within the department. So the audit committees, and you would see it says cluster audit committees, because we have a shared internal audit function within the province, which means we're sitting within the Department of the Premier, but we provide services to all the departments, and that we actually also provide a service to Provincial Parliament on internal audit and audit committees. But the mandate is really arising from PFMA Section 77 and the Treasury Regulation 3.1 that says that the audit committee is constituted as a statutory committee that provides, it is an oversight body that provides independent oversight over governance, risk management, and control processes. The AC or its members do not perform any operational activity, and I think this is important, including management functions, nor do they assume any managerial responsibilities. So here, all our audit committee members are not employees of departments. They are actually independent, and they are not political office bearers, so they are not government employees, but they are, and that is to ensure their independence. In terms of the composition of the audit committees, on each audit committee, we have a minimum of 3 members and a maximum of 6 qualified members. And again, they will be appointed in terms of Section 77 of the PFMA. And within the province, we have 3 audit committee clusters, so the chairpersons has introduced themselves. So the jobs cluster, which is headed by Mr. Comfort Bunting, that particular audit committee provides oversight over the governance, risk management and control of the Department of Education, Infrastructure, Mobility, Agriculture, Economic Development and Tourism. In the Wellbeing cluster that is chaired by Mr. Peter Strauss, we have the Departments of Health and Wellness, Social Development, Police Oversight and Community Safety, Cultural Affairs and Sports, and within Cultural Affairs and Sports, the Audit Committee also has the responsibility to provide oversight of the DCAS entities. Then Mr. Francois Barnard is the chairperson of the Governance, Innovation and Culture Cluster, and that includes the Department of the Premier, Provincial Treasury, Local Government, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, And you would see my note at the bottom also, the Governance, Innovation and Culture Audit Committee renders an audit committee service to the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, and they actually have a separate terms of reference to constitute their responsibilities. So what you would see in the annual report is the last few portions of Part C is on internal audit and the audit committee. And in there, and Chair, with your permission, I actually want to just switch to the annual report, because it's just going to make it easier to demonstrate by means of what is contained in there.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Let me just share, give me a second. And is it visible, Chairperson?
Yes, it is.
So then under internal audit and the audit committees, there's usually a brief description of, what internal audit does, the key activities, a summary of our work. And internal audit is also, as much as we sit within the department, we are independent, objective assurance and consulting service. So we actually want to assist departments to improve their operations. And we do that through activities of assessing governance processes, and we make appropriate recommendation for improvement where required. We also evaluate how effective and adequate the risk management process contributes to the department achieving its objectives. And internal audit also assists the accounting officers in maintaining effective and efficient controls, and we do that by evaluating the internal controls of the department. So we would look at whether the design of the controls are adequate to mitigate the risks. But secondly, and more importantly, we look at the implementation of controls, whether it's accurately implemented, whether we've applied resources adequately, to make sure that the department ultimately achieve its objectives. So as internal audit, we actually report, I usually explain to people that we have two bosses, if I can say it like that. So we report into the department through the DDG to the head of the department, but we call that administrative reporting. So in terms of our performance, in terms of the annual performance reports, budgeting and performance management, we do that administratively within the department, but we report functionally to the audit committee. And we're doing that in terms of what we call our internal audit standards. And the reason why the reporting line is functionally to the audit committee is to demonstrate the independence of internal audit, so that there's no undue influence when we issue our reports and make recommendations. And that is why we report to the audit committee. Now, the audit committee also, there's a plan that internal audit does every year, and the audit committee approves that particular plan. So here in the annual report, you would see there's also information on the internal audit work that we've completed during a particular financial year, and that internal audit work that is referred to in the annual report is what the audit committee approved at the beginning of a financial year. Then part of Part C is basically also explaining the role of the audit committee, the fact that it is established as an oversight body to provide independent assurance. And there's also a list of the activities that the audit committee actually provides oversight over. And the first one, like I explained, is internal audit. Then also the work of the Auditor General, where they make recommendations to accounting officers. the department's accounting and reporting processes and also accounting policies, the AG's management report. The audit committee also provide oversight in terms of the in-year monitoring, so the financial side of the department, risk management, internal control, predetermined objectives, so those targets that are contained in the annual reports, and then ethics, fraud, and corruption. Then this table in the annual report really discloses the relevant information of the audit committee. So it gives you a breakdown of who are the audit committee members for that particular department. It shows their qualification, dates appointed. So all the audit committee members are appointed on contract, and we usually have a 3-year term in which they operate as audit committee members. And with the option, usually they can have a term of 2 consecutive 3 years, so a total of 6 years. But after that, we do appoint new members, and that is also to assist in keeping independence and objectivity also of the audit committee members. So you might see sometimes that this table talks about date resign, but that's really when the contract of audit committee members expired. And the number of meetings are also indicated, and it might vary, but there's usually explanations for it. As an example, you would see Mr. A. Davids here on page 136. Only attended 2 meetings, but the reason why he only attended 2 meetings is that he was appointed in January 2023 and basically replaced Ms. M. Kinnes on that audit committee. So it's not like he didn't attend, it's just a timing issue. So we usually, the audit committee is required to operate in terms of a quorum for them to make decisions, and that quorum is also stipulated in what we call the audit committee's terms of reference. So if there's not a quorum, we usually would cancel or not cancel, postpone the meeting until there's available members to make sure that they adequately fulfill their oversight responsibility. Then further down in on page 137 of this education report, you would see the audit committee report, and the audit committee report actually gets compiled by the audit committee chairperson. So Francois would do it for his departments within the governance, innovation and culture cluster. So he would basically sign the audit report for the Department of the Premier, Treasury, local government, etc. And in the audit committee report, what you would see is where the chairperson has to confirm that they've operated in terms of their formal terms of reference, and it's usually in this first paragraph here on the effectiveness of internal control. The chairperson talks about that within his report. And under the effectiveness of internal control, it's really considering, and you would see we refer to combined assurance within here. And the combined assurance framework is really a combination of the work done by other assurance providers. And in our instance, we basically refer here to the work done by internal audit, the work done by the Auditor General, and the work done by the internal control units. And the combined assurance framework is really giving the audit committee also, or the combined assurance work gives the audit committee a fair idea in terms of whether there's work done on the risks of the department and how the findings from those particular reports actually gets implemented by the various departments. So the audit committee report usually gives a breakdown of what combined assurance entails, but also what they have done as the audit committee in terms of monitoring the effective implementation of that combined assurance plan. Then in the audit committee report, there's also a list of the internal audit projects that we as internal audit has performed. And I reflected on it earlier to say that the audit committee approves the plan, and in their report, they just indicate which are those projects, but they also account whether they are satisfied as an audit committee with the work that was performed, but also the audit committee monitors whether management has first of all agreed with the recommendation and then monitor the implementation of those recommendations made by internal audit, whether the department has implemented that. And that you would see usually in the last paragraph, this last paragraph on page 137 on internal audit, on the effectiveness of internal controls. Then the audit committee basically give a reflection on their oversight responsibility in terms of the in-year monitoring and the quarterly reports that departments provide to them. Similarly, on risk management, the audit committee gives an indication whether there was, the audit committee provide independent oversight. They review and comment on the quarterly reports that the risk management, that the departments provide to the audit committee. And also, they also look at ICT governance matters of the department. And then the audit committee usually also review, on the evaluation of financial statements. With the financial statements, they review and discuss the financial statements to be included in the annual report, and that gets discussed with the Auditor General and the Accounting Officer, the HODs of the department and the CFOs. The Audit Committee also review changes to accounting policies and practices that gets reported in the financial statements, and they also review material adjustments that's being made as a result of the audit by the AG. Then the audit committee also has a role to play in terms of compliance, whether there's compliance to legislation and circulars by departments. They look at performance information, and I refer to predetermined objectives, which is basically the targets within the annual reports, and the audit committee make recommendations for improvement to the departments, and they monitor progress against these predetermined objectives also on a quarterly basis. On this page 139, it's basically the audit committee's report back on the work that they've done in relation to the Auditor General. And I think I referred already to the management report and the audit report, but also that part of their role is looking at the department's implementation plan for audit issues, things that were raised by the Auditor General, and how the department is faring in terms of implementing those. And at the end of the audit committee report, it is just also a commitment or an indication whether they concur with the opinion of the audit committee on the financial statements, and they then make a recommendation to the department to accept or not, if there's certain additional things that they would like of the Auditor General's report. And that is basically the contribution of internal audit and the audit committee to part C of the annual reports. The last portion on the annual report is just on the the BBBE compliance, but that is also information that is being provided by the departments. Chairperson, that is the end of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kern-Cross. It's a very good presentation. Thank you for taking us through it. Members, I'm going to ask any members if there's any points, questions or points of clarity. Members? I don't see any hands. There's no hands. Let me just check. I see no. So everybody is sorted. Thank you very much. So that's the end, Mrs. Kern-Cross. There's no questions. Thank you very much. Oh, there's one hand. There's one hand. There's one hand. Member Lekker. Member Lekker is hand is up. Member Lekker, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies. I'm struggling with the gadget here. I would have wanted to raise my hand before you make your comments. Wrapping up on the presentation, I sincerely apologize for that. Chair, I'm reading on the comment on page 139 by the AG. I just want to check, Chair, in light of the corrective actions that are mentioned here. It says the corrective actions on the detailed findings raised by AG are monitored. I want to check whether there were actually actions that the department was directed to attend to based on this report, on the second last paragraph. And if so, what are those? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Lekker. Ms. Kern-Cross, do you want to answer that?
Chair, I can, and the chairpersons can also come in. Usually the actions that is referred to in the audit committee report is those findings that is raised by the Auditor General in the management reports to the departments. And there is this unit within the departments, the internal control unit, that manages the progress of implementation, and the internal control unit usually provides feedback to the audit committee on a quarterly basis on those particular actions. The detail of those actions, particularly for education, we don't have now, Chairperson, but that is also something that can be requested either from us or, more importantly, probably the best place is from the department.
Thank you very much. I think our coordinator will take notes on that. We'll get to that in our committee discussions. Thank you very much, Mr. Kern-Cross. Is that all, members? Can we move over to the Auditor General? Thank you very much, Ms. Kern-Cross. You can stay with us or you can leave. Up to you, Mrs. Kern-Cross and your team, but I'm giving over to the Auditor General. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and to all the members. Thank you for having us. We really do appreciate the opportunity to be able to just engage with you before the committee sessions do commence. So we've also put together a bit of a presentation, but I will be then going through the Education Department's Auditor's Report. And just to holistically show you some of the areas that we do report on, we've brought two more examples of audit reports, but we're going to just refer to specific sections in those auditors' reports so that you can see how it would look holistically. So from our side, that's basically the lineup. So Tasneem, you can move to the next slide. So just a reminder around our mission and our vision. As an audit office, we've got a constitutional mandate. And as a Supreme Audit Institution of South Africa, we exist to strengthen our country's democracy. And we do this by enabling oversight, accountability, and governance through public sector, in the public sector through our auditing. So we use the audit mandate to achieve this. And the aim is to build public confidence. And our vision is to be recognized by all our stakeholders as the relevant supreme audit institution that enhances public sector accountability. And I think it's important that I mention the vision, because even yourselves as a committee, stakeholder, very relevant engagement that we're having today, it is for us ultimately to ensure that we can help enhance the public sector accountability when it comes to your mandate and what you aim to achieve. Tasneem, you can go to the next slide. So here is just a quick update in terms of the correlation between our mandate and the mandate of the legislature sector, so in terms of Parliament and the legislature, and as well as matching it up to the oversight responsibility around portfolio committees. And I think what's important is that how we fit into the environment around the conclusion that we, the report that we provide, an opinion on the financial statements, a conclusion or findings on predetermined objectives, and compliance with applicable legislation. And important so that we then also give the internal controls in the environment. And you'll see when I unpack the auditor's report, it is a wealth of knowledge around the functioning of the government entity, the departments, on how they've actually fared in multiple areas and not only in terms of the finances. Just a reminder that we obviously have the amended mandate around material irregularities, which came into existence in April 2019. So that one is where we then can issue a material irregularity to a accounting officer if we do believe that that accounting officer in fact is not fulfilling their role and responsibility in terms of the legislation. So that is important to know that ultimately fits into how oversight a role comes through, as well as the engagement that you do have to be able to utilize our reports to make that engagement robust enough for impact and for action. Tasneem, next slide. So I wanted to just quickly also touch on our role and responsibility as a supreme audit institution. So outside of the international standards on auditing, we've also adopted the international standards of supreme audit institutions. And there's one standard, SIP 12, which talks about the values and benefits that a SI ought to bring in making a difference to the lives of the citizens in which the country that they exist in. And we've adopted this because what's important is that it resonated with us and it aligned to the constitutional mandate that we have, where you will see that the first area that it calls on is to ensure that the SI continues strengthening the accountability, transparency and integrity of the government and the public sector entities, which is very closely linked to the aspects of the mandate. Secondly, it's for us to make sure that we continuously demonstrate our relevance, not only to the government entities, but to Parliament, to the citizens of the country, as well as any other stakeholders that we engage with. And ultimately also for us to be able to practice what we preach. So be a model organization and lead by example. And we do believe that if we do continue doing these three aspects, we will then make a difference to the lives of the citizens. It is also important to understand that in terms of the accountability ecosystem that we've plotted ourselves in the center as we touch majority of the stakeholders, from the officials in the department to the leadership in the department, the accounting officer, the executive authority, ultimately also the parliamentary processes, the legislature, and yourselves as committee members. We also audit the coordinating institutions. So those coordinating institutions have a role to play in the proper functioning of key service delivery departments. So when we adopt a standard like this, what it allows us to do is it allows us to make sure that we complete the value chain in terms of sharing key insights, ensuring that in fact we can influence, at multiple levels. So it's the same message. However, ultimately the call to action of that accountability and of that stakeholder can be tailor-made and clear, giving sufficient direction of what needs to be done. So I think that's what we aim to do predominantly when we are engaging as well, when we come to the portfolio committee. Thanks, Tasneem. Then just a refresher around our strategic aspiration. And I do know that we had an induction session. And I do recall that some members were online and some members were in the room. But just a refresher around how we've sort of adjusted our approach on utilizing the information that we gather from the audit process. The context is that we want to aspire to have stronger, more direct and consistent impact in improving the lived reality of South Africans. And how we want to do that is we want to be sustainably and efficiently shifting public sector culture through insight, influence, and enforcement. And you'll see, I will touch on the characteristics that we want to see within the public sector culture. A key to note is that, again, accountability from an accountability ecosystem perspective, every stakeholder has a role to play in setting the right culture in the public sector. And I think from our side, we've reflected on how we can utilize our audit tool to make sure that we set the right tone and we push into action those that we do believe are not fulfilling the public sector culture. So how we want to do this is to be able to determine whether, in fact, our auditees are doing harm or they are doing good. So we have an aspiration that if once we are engaging with the accounting officers, executive authorities around the insights that we obtain during the audit process, we'd be able to shift them more towards doing good. When we have the insights, we then sit around the table to be able to have the right conversations and to influence them. And if I can then link this back to the province itself, the province from a provincial government perspective has good audit outcomes. It's a clean environment. So the influence conversations that we're having is to make sure that that environment is sustained. And it's sustained in a manner that allows for achievement of mandate. So we are the ones that audit the finances. We then look at the predetermined objectives so we can connect the dots in terms of the promises made in terms of the APP, ultimately what has been reported and the usage of the budget. And we do test compliance with laws and regulations, which allows us to see whether the process that was followed, in fact, was compliant with the laws and regulations. So we can see holistically how the environment is, whether it is stable, and ultimately be able to pick up pressure points that we believe the accounting officer should concentrate on. Further to that, we also want to be able to say if the mandate of the department is in fact being fulfilled through the set indicators and the targets, and what has hampered or what has promoted their ability to meet those indicators and targets. So when I talk about the positive, it's about identifying best practices and looking at within the department whether those best practices have in fact been bedded down from a performance objective perspective, not from a financial sustainability perspective. And that's where our influence conversations come in. So that's we do believe will be able to shift the continuum. Lastly, when we do find that accounting officers, in fact, are not doing what they ought to be doing, when we identify a non-compliance, we then can activate our lever of material irregularities, and we call that enforcement. And we do believe that that is also a tool that we could utilize to shift the public sector culture. We've characterized the culture shift and the public sector behavior in 4 areas. It's around performance, accountability, transparency to all stakeholders, and making sure that there's institutional integrity. And performance is both financial and performance objectives, and being able to clearly achieve those to ensure that the mandate is fulfilled and that there's no level of harm to the public. Accountability is about making sure that systems and processes are adequately implemented, and that if there is any poor performance in the system, that there's a level of consequence management, but also rectification of the environment. So accountability can be positive to say that ensuring that there's significant processes with being fulfilled by officials and they understand their role and responsibility. Transparency around the fact that we've got transparent reporting, that in fact it is credible reporting and that the public can rely on that information. And institutional integrity is the tone at the top, that there is no conflict of interest and there is clear ethical behavior in the environment. So if we can move to the next slide, just very quickly, where do I fit into this? So I'm the business unit leader for the audit office in the Western Cape. I have a team under me, which is made up of 2 deputy business unit leaders, together with 10 senior managers who go out into the province from the provincial perspective and do the audits. They are our engagement managers. And we basically are responsible for ensuring that the audit process is run. We engage with the stakeholders, we direct and manage our projects such that we can meet the legislative deadline and issue a high quality auditor's report according to the mandate of the audit office. I can move on to the next slide, Tasneem. So just into the workshop. So what, as I've indicated, we're going to be doing the education department's auditor's report, which I'll take you through by page. Then we'll be looking at the Northwest Department of Public Works, and that one I just want to utilize it to show you how compliance findings come through and to match it up with the internal control deficiencies. That will be the second example. And the last example I want to show you is NSFAS. But I'm not going to go through the full auditor's report because it was an adverse opinion. But I will want to utilize it to show members how the MI section looks, because we do not have something like that in the province. So it's just important to also be aware of how the MI section in fact looks. So as you are aware that we then, our auditor's report is then broken down in a manner that can be easily identifiable on the area. So if Tasneem can go to the next slide, give you an overview of how and the structure of an auditor's report. So some of you may be very familiar with this. So you will see on the left-hand side, we start with the financial statements, which will have the opinion and the basis of the opinion. Roles and responsibilities of both the auditor and the accounting officer is included in there. And then we've got things like other matters or emphasis of matter that come through. And if I were to then say in terms of the APR, the next section that will come through, the annual performance report, we do not include an opinion in the auditor's report, but we bring through material findings in the environment. So we'll give a scope to indicate which programs were selected for testing. We will conclude on what we found or what we didn't find. So if we didn't find any findings, we'd say so. If we found something, we'll explain. And we also make sure that we show the roles and responsibilities of both the accounting officer and the auditor. So the reader of the auditor's report understands. And then there are other matters there as well. Under compliance heading, you'll see there'll be roles and responsibilities. If there are any findings in that space, there will be the finding, or if there'll be an opinion or conclusion indicating whether there was anything identified. Then we've got other information that sits in the annual report. So as part of our responsibilities to review the rest of the annual report to identify if there's anything contradicting what we had audited. We clearly indicate the roles and responsibilities there. We indicate the exclusions that we've had. So if there are any unaudited information, so we'll say what we have reviewed and if we found anything in that space. In the internal controls, you'll see the middle of the slide, we talk about our roles and responsibilities in terms of the internal control environment. And if we have any findings in terms of the financial statements, the performance reporting, or the compliance, we indicate what was the internal control deficiency. And that is a very key paragraph in order for members to understand what went wrong in the environment, and to also then understand when you have engagements with the executive authority, what would you correct in that environment. And I think that's also one of the areas that the audit committee plays a role in. Then we would have material irregularities, so we indicate the roles and responsibilities, and then what we've reported in terms of the material irregularities. So we give background on the item together with certain actions that we've taken, and we indicate where we are at in terms of that MI. And then there's an other report section. So if there was any investigations that's ongoing at the time of the auditor's report, it is only prudent for us to be able to elevate it to the user. So say, for instance, there is an investigation, it impacts certain areas, we indicate which area it impacts. If there is a specific role that it impacts, we indicate that, and we say that it has not been completed at the time of this auditor's report. It's a way of flagging that if something comes out of that investigation report, we have the right to relook at our audit opinion, or it would potentially impact the next year's audit. What we've done over the last couple of years, we've introduced annexures, which really unpacks the roles and responsibilities in a little bit more detail. And of recent, we've included a table which clearly indicates which laws and regulations we actually went and tested. So we don't test all laws and regulations, but we test laws and regulations that have a financial and performance information impact, so that can be correlated to our opinion. So ultimately, in a nutshell, you find a role of an accounting officer and a role of an auditor in every section. We only report on material misstatements. So there would be misstatements that could potentially be in the system, say for financial statements, but we only report on what is material and materiality according to our methodology. Then we report on usefulness and reliability on annual performance report, but that too also we have a materiality that we set. So if certain aspects are materially impact, we would then report on reliability from a materiality perspective. So the usefulness is tested against the framework, and reliability is we tested against supporting information. And we find that the supporting information, in fact, is materially impacted. So there is significant information that we couldn't verify. That's where you'll see it'll impact reliability. And then ultimately, we have the audit report signatory. So the Auditor General doesn't sign every report. There's a delegation of authority within our environment, and it's our senior leadership, so from our senior managers upwards, who actually sign off audit reports. We do evaluate if we've got people in the system for significantly long amount of time. So we've got a rotation process that we do follow, that the same person doesn't continue to do the audit for longer than 5 years. So 5 years is the cutoff, and we conduct a rotation of even the engagement manager, signatory, and if not, the audit team. So from here, I think we're going to jump into then the education department's auditor's report, so we can then go through that. So as Tasneem is adjusting and changing screens, I think it's important to also understand that within the private sector, you would only get the first block around the financial statements. Whereas in the public sector, we've mandated to do much more, and you can see how it comes through in terms of the report that we present. So here's the report of the Auditor General to the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. So all of our reports are directed to the legislature, and we indicate which vote, and we then indicate the department. As I've indicated, the first part, you'll see it sitting in a block. It says report on the audit of the financial statements, and in there lies our opinion, and the opinion is generally 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph indicates what we audited, and the specific pages of the annual report that we audited, and the specific statements. So you'll see it says Western Cape Education Department, financial statements of the department, set out on pages 216 and 264. And it comprises the appropriation statement, the statement of financial position for that year ended, the statement of financial performance, and then the changes in net assets, the cash flow statement. So we just want to be very clear that those are the statements. And then we indicate that it's the notes as well as any significant accounting policies. And then the next paragraph then gives the opinion, which talks about fair presentation. So you'll say, in my opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the department. And then we talk about the financial performance, the cash flows. And the last part of that paragraph indicates the accounting framework, which is the modified cash standard, together with the legislation. So the applicable legislation would be the PFMA and the DORA. So this would be an unqualified audit opinion. And you would see that when we do have other audit opinions, we indicate to say that this is a qualification. So that will be that the financial statements fairly present, except for X, Y, and Z areas, which we then reference to the bottom in the basis for opinion. And if it is a adverse, very similar, we'll say they're not fairly present. And if it's a disclaimer, we will say that, in fact, we cannot provide an opinion because a disclaimer is limitation by nature, and we could not verify the information in the financial statements. So if you can go to the basis of opinion paragraph, you'll see that in the basis of opinion, we indicate the standards with which we've conducted the audit, the responsibilities around the financial statements audit. We have to confirm our independence to Parliament and the code that we utilize. We ensure that we fulfill the ethical responsibility, and this we do on a continuous basis. We do it at a firm level as well as we do it at an audit level. And we do the independence checks of our teams as well as the audit goes along. And then we indicate that we believe that the audit evidence that we've obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide the basis for our opinion. So for our opinion on the top. Then we would raise any other matter. So if it could be either an emphasis or an other matter. So an emphasis is very specific, that we've identified certain aspects that were reported in the financial statements that we want to elevate, or an other matter, which is very similar, where if there is information that is there, that is attached to the financial statements that we haven't audited, then we elevate that we in fact have not audited that, and this opinion that we've made on the top is not covering these sections. So that's also quite important to note. Then you'll see that post this part, Tasneem, you can scroll down. So post this part here, you'll see that on the top we had one more paragraph. So the other matters can span multiple paragraphs. It doesn't necessarily need to be all confined into the one paragraph. So you'll see the other matter will have a specific heading, and together with that will explain to you what the matter is, where you would find it, and then say that I do not express, in the last paragraph will say that I do not express an opinion on that aspect. If you'll remember last year, there was a change in the irregular expenditure and fruitless and wasteful expenditure disclosures. It was no longer required to indicate all of the movements in the environment, but that could be put into the annual report. And there was only then a balance left over in the disclosure note. So now what we did is we just indicated that there was this change and that the information is now sitting in the annual report and that we did not audit it. And I think it was something very important. So this is where a auditor applies their judgment. So as an audit office, we took a decision to include this. So you'll probably not see this in the current year because we've already put in other matter last year. And as I've indicated, you'll see that there'll be the accounting officer's responsibility for the financial statements and for them to comply with the legislation as well as the accounting framework for them to prepare it, and that they were comfortable with the internal control environment and that they ultimately did check whether the financial statements were free of material misstatements. So it is the responsibility. Then we give our responsibility. It's about that we provide reasonable assurance on the financial statements, free of material misstatement, which is very key, whether due to fraud or error, and then we ultimately issue then the opinion, and we go through what a reasonable assurance is. So in our environment, the reasonable assurance is the highest level of assurance that you can get from the auditor. It's not an absolute assurance, but ultimately does indicate that we don't necessarily guarantee that we'll pick up all material misstatements by nature of the testing that we do. So you'll see that it also there now refers to the annexure in paragraph 12. That's where we went and put the further responsibilities. Then if we jump into the report on the audit of annual performance report, here again, we indicate that according to what we've conducted our audit, so the Public Audit Act allows us to do it, and that I must then audit and report on the usefulness and reliability. So those are the two sections. But we do that only on the programs that we've selected. So this is where we clarify that we've selected the programs. And then we say that the accounting officer is responsible for the preparation of the full report. So based on the selected programs, we then list it in that paragraph 14 that you'll see that we included, and we reference the user to the pages that we it is in fact reported upon. And paragraph 15 then goes into that we've actually evaluated this information and the selected programs against the performance management and reporting framework, right? And that's where we then define to say that when an annual performance report is in fact prepared using this criteria, it provides useful and reliable information and insights to users on the department's planning and delivery on its mandate and objectives, which is a very key and important point to make, because that is with which we then designed our procedures, which is then what appears in paragraph 16, where we bullet the actual procedures that we've conducted in line with achieving that useful and reliable information for the in this case, the 3 programs. So you'll see we audited public ordinary school education, program 5, which is early childhood development, and program 6, which is infrastructure development. Tasneem, you can scroll down, so as I've indicated, so paragraph 16 does indicate the procedures that we've conducted. So it allows you to understand what we tested. Then in paragraph 17, we clarified that the procedures that we performed were for the purposes of reporting material findings only, and it's not to express an assurance opinion. So that's to be clear to the user and yourselves that we haven't given assurance on this, but if we found anything material, we'll bring it over here. And this is where we then report on that. We would say, if we found anything material, so I did not identify any material findings. And in the case of education department, it was for program 5 and program 6. So that will give you then an indication that one of the programs did in fact have a material finding, which is then will follow thereafter. And it will then explain to you exactly which indicator within the program had the material finding. And in paragraph 20, it will clearly show to you that an achievement of 58.6% was reported against a target of 60%. However, the audit evidence did not support this achievement, and I could not determine the actual achievement, but I estimate it to be materially misstated. So what could this mean? It could mean one or two things. So we requested evidence for the actual achievement, and we got information, and the information did not tie up, or it could mean that we didn't receive the information, so we couldn't determine it. And in this case, we could not determine the actual achievement because we did not receive all the information to be able to verify it. So that's where then you already know that there is then a concern around that one. Very important, when one reads this, later on the internal control deficiency section will give you the insight into what went wrong for this matter. So if you scroll down, then even in the performance reporting section, we've got other matters. And here you'll find an important other matter which talks about the achievement of planned targets. So remember, an other matter is an area where we emphasize or we bring to the attention of the user something that's already reported in the annual report. And in our case, this is where we're highlighting this is what the planned target is, and this is what the reported achievement is. And to the user, we're directing them to where the explanations of over and under achievements are. So you'll see that paragraph 22 does that. So this information should be considered in the context of the material finding on the reported performance information, which is very key. So if we're saying that we couldn't verify a specific indicator, when a user is reading that indicator, please understand that that reason that they're also reading must be read together with our paragraph on the top. So you'll see they will then include a table which then shows the program, how many targets were in fact achieved. So in this one's case, there was 4 out of the 10 targets that were achieved, how much budget was in fact spent, and then ultimately the user can then be able to read the reasons. So if you go down Tasneem, then you'll see that we do that for every program. And then on a paragraph following the tables, we then indicate the page numbers on which there was underachievement explanations for the programs that we audited. Also, in instances where we've done work and we've identified misstatements and the account accounting officer has managed to correct the misstatements, thus allowing no material findings to happen in that program that we audited, we still elevated under other matters. So you'll find a heading called material misstatements, and that's where we will tell you that I identified material misstatements in the APR that was submitted for auditing. And these material misstatements were in the reported performance information of the program 6, subsequently corrected all misstatements, and I did not include any material findings in this report on the top. And I think this is very important to be read in the conjunction with the responsibility of the accounting officer to have submitted to us a credible, reliable, useful annual performance report. And it just shows you that ultimately there is potentially a concern in the system. Maybe perhaps there is something that needs to be adjusted so that this does not repeat itself in the next cycle. Then the next section then is the report on the compliance with legislation. And this is where we again indicate what we're auditing against, and that we are doing it against our PAA. That's a general notice that we issue that indicates which legislation that we're going to be auditing, so that I must audit and report on compliance with applicable legislation relating to financial matters, financial management, and other related matters. However, that we show that the accounting officer is responsible for the department's compliance with legislation. And then we also then perform, then in paragraph 27, we indicate we've got procedures for specific key legislation. And we're doing a findings engagement. So this is not an assurance engagement. So if we have any key findings that we identify, which are significant in nature, we then elevate it to the auditor's report. So it doesn't give you any assurance. We're not giving any conclusion. We will just then elevate the findings. So then you'll see as we go down the paragraph, we then indicate that we've got the process, we've selected certain key legislation and we've tested it, and that we will then be comfortable that it's in a manner that is understandable. And ultimately, if you want to know the detail of which legislation we've audited, then it appears in the annexure. And in this instance at education, we didn't identify any material non-compliance with the selected legislation. Let's scroll down, Tasneem. So there, this part is then the other information. So as I mentioned, we audit then the other information, not audit, sorry, we read the other information. So the accounting officer is responsible for that other information. And it doesn't, when we're saying that other information does not include the financial statements, it doesn't include the selected programs that were presented in the annual performance report, which is what we're specifically reporting on in the auditor's report on the top. And it says my opinion on the financial statements, the report on the audit of the annual performance report, and the report on compliance do not cover other information included in the annual report. And then we're clarifying that it doesn't express an opinion or any form of assurance or conclusion provided on that. We then indicate what our responsibility is, just to read it, to consider that there's no material inconsistencies between the financial statements and the APR programs that we audited, and that to my knowledge of what I've obtained in the audit, that anything that appears in that section is misstated or could also misrepresent. So, and then we give the indication that in paragraph 3, that based on the work that I've performed, I conclude that there, so if I do find it, then I will then elevate it in this section, and then I'll have to report on it. So we also do duplicate checks. So we check now, and we check, so we check when we get the annual report in a draft format, as well as when it is published, we double check it as well. And then paragraph 34 then confirms whether I found something inconsistent or whether in fact there's nothing in that regard. A very important section, this is the internal control deficiencies section. So you'll see that this is where we've considered the internal controls that are relevant to the financial statements, APR, and the compliance with legislation. However, my objective was not to express any form of assurance on that control. So it was just on those areas. And the matters reported below are limited to the significant internal control deficiencies that resulted in material findings in the annual performance report that's included in this report. So for education department, we had nothing under financial statements. We had nothing under compliance, but we had that one significant finding under performance reporting. And then that paragraph following that sentence will then indicate what it was. So it will tell you that the department did not perform adequate confirmation of evidence to support the reported performance achievements. The review processes for the performance information reported were not effective and adequate to prevent or detect and correct material misstatements, such that achievements reported are in line with the technical indicator description. So we try to give as much information in this space for us to be able to guide the user of the report to say, in fact, this is what went wrong. It also then gives an indication of what needs to be corrected in the system. And then you'll find our signature. It'll always say Auditor General. It'll say the city or the town that we signed the report in and the date that we did sign the report. And obviously to validate that we are AGSA, we've got our logo that appears after our signature on all auditors' reports. So that is the report of the Education Department. I want to quickly jump to the Auditor's Report of Northwest so that you could see how compliance would look. Chair, I see a hand.
Member van Wyk.
Yes, Chair. All I want to do is to give the Auditor General a moment just to catch her breath, because I think to me she's done an excellent explanation of the AG's role and the reports, and it certainly will help us as committee to do the work that we need. But I think she's spoken for quite long there, and I think just to give her a chance to have a sip of water over there before she continues. So that's why I've interrupted your meeting, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much, Member van Wyk. AG, you can continue. I think you have that sip of water now. Thank you.
Yes. No, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, so the compliance part is really for us to be able to communicate that during the audit process, there's certain material findings that we would have identified. So you'll see paragraph 37 and 38 predominantly looks the same in every auditor's report. I then also indicate the process, so 39 is the same. But what would be then different in this case would be that we've got paragraph 40 onwards. So if Tasneem, you can scroll down just to show how compliance will ultimately look. And what we would then elevate. So here you'll see that we then say that material findings on this paragraph 40, material findings on compliance with selected legislative requirements presented per compliance theme are as follows. So what we've done is that we've identified certain compliance themes which will make it very important for the user, because then you can link it to what you're looking at in terms of the auditor's report. So in this case, this auditee received a qualified audit opinion in a few areas, and they ultimately had issues in their financial statements. And once we've identified material misstatements in the financial statements, and those could be corrected, then we elevate a certain non-compliance in terms of the PFMA. If those could also not be corrected, we still also elevate it in terms of the PFMA. So in terms of the PFMA, we'll say the financial statements submitted for auditing were not prepared in accordance with prescribed financial reporting framework and or supported by full and proper records as required by section 40, 1A and B of the PFMA. So we'll be very clear of what needed to have been done, what unfortunately did not happen according to which legislation. And we will then utilize that paragraph to further expand as to where the issues lied and what impact it has had in terms of it. So you'll see that we end off this paragraph by saying, but the uncorrected material misstatements resulted in the financial statements receiving a qualified opinion. So you'll see also we then, if we were to do the expenditure management, that one is around effective and appropriate steps were not taken to prevent irregular expenditure. And then we indicate in terms of which legislation, which regulation, and then we then link it back to where we've reported this matter. So if this matter has still had an impact on the financial opinion on the top, then we will make that linkage. Another example I want to use was under procurement, so paragraph 44. So this one, under procurement and contract management, you can see that there is a non-compliance with legislation. It looks like a regulation as well as an instruction note. So it says some of the goods and services of a transaction value of 2,000 rands, but not exceeding 1 million, were procured without following quotation process as required by the Treasury regulation and a instruction note, so paragraph 3.2.1 of a National Treasury instruction. And we direct you exactly to which instruction note. In this instance, what we're saying is basically there is a non-compliance in the system when we tested procurement and contract management, and we explained to you at which level it has happened. And for it to have appeared here means that we had material instances for it to have occurred. So that's quite important to note. So then you would then understand that in fact, okay, so it doesn't impact my financial opinion, but it was significant enough for us to elevate it. So it comes from a compliance with laws and regulations perspective. So that's why I wanted to make a distinction of two types of non-compliances that you could get. A non-compliance that could impact what has been reported under the financial opinion. You could also get a non-compliance that could impact what has been reported around predetermined objectives, the APR. But then you have pure non-compliances that when we went and tested it, we found that many instances that in fact it became material, that in fact the compliance monitoring is not in place. And very similarly to what I've mentioned around internal control deficiencies, if Tasneem scrolls down, you will see that the internal control deficiencies would be more vast in attempting to explain what really went wrong. So you will see if she scrolls down and she shows you paragraph 55 and 56 covers it. So you have two types of deficiencies in the environment. You have one that is around adequate oversight over reporting and compliance with laws and regulations and internal controls. And we unpack it, and then it will even indicate us under some circumstances where we found that the leadership or the accounting officer did implement an action plan previously, that in actual fact that action plan hasn't yet worked. So you'll see leadership did not adequately monitor the action plan to address weaknesses in internal controls, as some of the findings from the previous years remain unresolved. The slow implementation of consequence management also contributed negatively. So we try to provide as much information as possible, because one would always say it can't be a fresh internal control deficiency. It's probably something that existed. And it is important for us as auditors to then guide Parliament to say, in fact, these matters were picked up previously. There was an action plan put in place. We do not believe this act happened, so there was inadequate monitoring of that plan. So we can provide sufficient information around that. So I wanted to just demonstrate the importance of understanding how you read the internal control deficiency when you are identifying and looking at the non-compliance. The last report I want to then utilize is NSFAS. So the NSFAS report, I want to then show you the MI section of how it in fact looks, the material irregularity. So it's a little bit tiny. So I think Tasneem is going to just zoom into this paragraph 56, 55 onwards, so that we can just see it a bit more closer. So if material irregularity has been issued, and if members are aware, material irregularity is basically a non-compliance that we've identified through the audit process, but it's not only a non-compliance, it could be a breach of a fiduciary duty, it could be fraud or theft, and if it could potentially result in financial loss or has resulted in financial loss, harm to the public, not meeting its mandate, harm to the institution, we then consider it to issue a material irregularity. And as I mentioned, we get to a point of a material irregularity is when we believe the accounting officer has not done what they ought to have done when this non-compliance has been identified. So we issue a notification. And when we issue a notification, we give the accounting officer an opportunity to respond. But we're very clear in that notification what we want them to do. We want them to investigate the matter. We want them to identify lapses in the control environment. We want them to make sure that they implement controls to plug these lapses in the control environment. They must quantify the financial loss. They must then identify where they need to take consequence management, and then they must try to recover that financial loss. So it's multiple fold that recommendations come through. When we find that an accounting officer is doing, so they respond to us and they commit to do X, Y, and Z, and we apply the SMART principles to it. And they then commit to say that by this date, we're going to do this, by this date, we're going to do this. We continue to track it in the background. When we find that we get to the next auditor's report, and we find that, in fact, they haven't made any traction, or they haven't necessarily done what they ought to have done, certain actions were actually not activated. So we evaluate each and every recommendation and action that the accounting officer committed to against that recommendation and what has progressed. We then move to the recommendation phase. So we consider whether, in fact, we ought to implement recommendations. This is where it will come into the auditor's report under a recommendation. So we will then include a paragraph in the auditor's report headed material irregularities. It will say, in accordance with the PAA and the material irregularity regulations, I have a responsibility to report on material irregularities identified during the audit and on the status of the material irregularities reported in the previous year's auditor's report. So you'll even see instances that if I've got a material irregularity that has not been finalized and concluded, the recommendations not properly implemented last year, it will reappear in next year's auditor's report. And for us, it's almost a mechanism to continuously keep the public aware and that we are transparent with the information to Parliament as well as to what we've done and what we believe has been done. So predominantly, we'll then indicate to say this was then a previously reported MI, or if it's a new one, we'll indicate this is a new one. We'll indicate what it's around. So in this one, it was disbursement in excess of the contract amount. We'll then explain the system. We'll explain why it is an MI. So you'll see that in paragraph 56, we do that. And then in paragraph 57, we talk about which years it's impacted. And we indicate which section of the legislation we believe there was a non-compliance in. In paragraph 58, we'll then indicate that the non-compliance is likely to result in financial loss if the over-disbursements are not recovered from the student. So say, for instance, it doesn't meet the requirement of financial loss, but it's a harm to the public, then that paragraph 58 would be adapted to say the non-compliance, in fact, has caused X, Y, and Z harm to the public or to the institution. Then paragraph 59 will give you the story as to we've actually issued this material irregularity on so-and-so date to the accounting officer. We've invited them to write back to us, and they've basically given us a submission on X amount, X date. And then ultimately, what did the accounting officer or accounting authority do in this instance? And we explain it on paragraph 60. And you can see we're very specific with the dates that we also give because we want to be transparent. We then said that we concluded that appropriate actions were not being taken to address this material irregularity. And then we give the story as to, then we notified the accounting authority on a specific date of the recommendations to address it. And then we give a due date for implementation of these recommendations. And then we list the recommendations thereafter. So once we list the recommendations thereafter, the last paragraph that would appear after the recommendations would then indicate that we will then follow this matter up before the next audit cycle ends. I think, Tasneem, if you can go to that one. So you'll see that in the case of NSFAS, this NSFAS has 3 material irregularities with recommendations sitting in the system, and that we've then concluded that, in fact, we're going to then be following up with these recommendations in the next cycle. It could be at the various stages. So after recommendation phase, if we believe that the MI is not being adequately responded to, we jump into a remediation process. So for example, if we believe that the accounting officer didn't institute an investigation like how they promised they would, or it hasn't been concluded, we can then refer it back to a public body. We can ask a public body to investigate and provide them with all of the information that we have. That will also then appear in the auditor's report. And ultimately, if we do believe that we don't refer it, we can implement remedial action. And remedial action is very similar to the recommendations. But once that happens, it becomes a legal process because remedial actions, once issued by the AG, are binding. So that will also then appear in the auditor's report. So we do have some instances of it, but I thought it'd be important that I just show you how it would sort of look. and that there's a lot of detail when it comes to material irregularities. Fortunately, you wouldn't encounter it in this provincial government because we do not have any MIs in the system at present. But that's the example that I wanted to show. So from my side, that covers the presentation as well as the practical side of the examples. Thank you very much, Chair.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Callan. It was very good and very interesting, comprehensive. I'm going to ask members for any questions or clarifications. I see no hands. Okay, no hands. Thank you very much, AG, for that. I think well done, and thank you for taking us through it, and thank you for your time and effort. We will then excuse you, and we will then go into committee matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Goodbye.
Thank you, members. Thank you. I think that was very comprehensive and very good from the audit committee and also the AG. Members, I think it was the one query from member Pat Lekker, but that we can also do in the annual report period. But if you want to maybe do it, we can do it. But we can ask in the annual report when we do address education and look at that and say, was there anything done? Member Lekker? I think Member Lekker's got problems with connection because she's left the meeting now. Coordinator, Mr. Davids, did you capture that? But I think we can do it in the annual reports. This was just trying to take us through the report so that when the members do go into the annual reports that we are, that we are well briefed to what to look for and so on. And Mr. Davis, did you capture what Member Pat Lekker said? Either we can, do ask that question in form of resolution, or we can do it at the annual reports. But Member Lekker is no longer with us. Mr. Davids?
Yes. Chairperson, yes, thank you very much, Chair, through you. Chair, I've noted it, and I will speak to the Audit Committee Chairperson for education. And then they can just, when they do brief the committee during the annual report session, Chair, then they can just highlight that issue and how it has been addressed, Chair.
Thank you. Member Lekker, did you hear that? I see Member Lekker is with us now. Member Lekker, did you hear what the coordinator said? I think Member Lekker still have problems unmuting. No. I think maybe we'll do it that way. Mr. David, we can do it that way, where we do then send it to the Education Committee department, and then they can brief us on that at the annual reports. Mr. Davis, is there anything else that we need to do?
Chairperson, yes, Chairperson is basically just the minute, Chair. If I can just share with the members, Chair. It's on the screen. If the members can just indicate if they can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, that's perfect, Chair. Chair,
continue.
Is it visible, Chair? Okay, thank you, Chair. So basically, it was just the meeting of the 14th of August that was had by the committee, Chair. This is a draft minutes, Chair. Basically, all the members were present in the meeting, Chair. As well, there were some alternate members that were present as well, and then the parliamentary officials, Chair. Chair, they were just welcoming and apologies, Chair, that Member Van Wyk experienced connectivity challenges, and Member Lacker joined the meeting afterwards because she also experienced connectivity challenges, Chair. Chairperson, then basically it was just SAPAC matters, Chair, the South African Association of Public Accounts Committees, where basically the committee discussed the 2 annual reports, the 2 financial years outstanding invoices, Chair, and then the committee resolved that it should be paid, Chair. And then Member Nkondlo also in that meeting strongly advised that we pay the SAPAC annual membership fees, Chair. Chair, then it was basically just for the selection of the Council of Delegates to SAPAC chairperson. It was yourself, Mr. Johnson, and Member Lacker that was selected to be part of the Council of Delegates when they do call quarterly meetings, if they do call quarterly meetings, Chair, for Council of Delegates. And then those 3 members will automatically join the SAPAC delegation from the Western Cape. Chairperson, then for SATCOPAC, Chair, basically it was just captured, Chair, who moved and who didn't move and some of the issues that were raised, and who declined the nomination for the members that attended the SATCOPAC, the recent SATCOPAC meeting in Zimbabwe, Chair, from the 9th to the 13th of September. And then, Chair, basically, if we go, the minute of the 5th of July was approved by the committee. And then, Chair, just to report back on the resolutions and actions of the committee, the committee resolved that WCPP pays the SAPAC invoices for the 2023-24 financial year, including the 2024-25 financial year, Chair. I can report back to the committee that those invoices has been sent for payment to the supply chain management unit of WCPP for payment a few weeks ago, Chairperson. And then again, as I've indicated, Chair, for the COD delegation, the Council of Delegates delegation, that the 3 members, it has been communicated to the Secretariat of SAPAC, who the 3 members are of the COD, Chair, which they have accepted. And then as well, Chair, just for traveling purposes, who the 4 members would be to attend the SATCOPAC conference in Zimbabwe, Chairperson. So all 3 resolutions have been actioned successfully, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davids. Is there any amendments or additions to the minutes, or can we have a proposer and a seconder for the minutes, please?
I will propose, Chair, Member van Wyk.
Thank you very much, Member van Wyk. Is there a seconder?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much for bailing us out. Member Mbombo, are you also seconding, or is that a hand?
It was for seconding.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Davids. And then I see you have on the, what is the South African, the SAPAC matters? Is there something that we must discuss on the SAPAC matters?
Chair, no, Chair. It's basically if you wanted to raise anything to the members from SAPAC or SATCOPAC chairperson, any information, Chair, from maybe from the EXCO, etc. chairperson. If there's nothing, Chair, then then there's nothing to then present back to the membership.
Yeah, just to say 2 things. The SATCOPAC, we're busy working on that report, and that will be presented to the committee. That's one. Secondly, the SAPAC is, we are looking at a meeting somewhere in November to have a SAPAC meeting, and that will be in Johannesburg, because at the moment we are looking at the chairperson of SAPAC. It was first the person was chairperson, and also the SECGEN, they were not re-elected, so they're no longer members. So we are trying to, in November, have some sort of meeting where we can elect executive. So at the moment, we only have the treasurer, and there was a decision made that for the interim, that the two members, that was the chairperson and also the SecGen, that they assist in the interim in order to make sure that SAPAC do have a annual general meeting where we can elect public office bearers. And also there is also a conversation to look at the constitution of SAPAC, because these things were not thought of. You have office bearers and suddenly you have a general election and you do not have office bearers after that, because you must be a member of parliament or the legislature in order to be part of SAPAC. So that is the only feedback. We will get some correspondence from the Secretariat to tell us when we will have those meetings, but we said we cannot have those meetings in October because we have our annual reports, and we are waiting for them, and Mr. Davids will get communication from the Secretariat. So that's the feedback. Mr. Davids, did I see your hand?
No, Chairperson, nothing from my side, Chair.
Is that everything? Did we deal with everything now?
Chair, that's everything, Chair. It's just there's a meeting next week, Chairperson, where Provincial Treasury will engage the committee in preparation for the upcoming annual report from the 7th to the 25th of October, Chair. Provincial Treasury will basically also assist the committee, assisting the committee on how to engage with the annual report, especially those sections of the annual reports that this committee must look at, Chair, section C, E, and F, and basically cross-reference those documents or those chapters in the different annual reports so that the members can oversight effectively and efficiently over the over the departments and the entities, Chair. So that will also happen next Wednesday afternoon between 2:30 and 4, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much. I've got the calendar because I see the calendar. It's also included today's events, but it's only the Provincial Treasury that we will engage, and that is from 2:30 till 4, because there's a chairperson's forum in-person meeting from 10 till 2. So that's why our meeting is now 2:30 till 4, and we will then get a presentation from Provincial Treasury. Thank you, members. Is that it? No other comments? Is that fine? Can we conclude? Member Lecker, I did see in the chat box that you said that you want the details soonest. So, Member Davids, Mr. Davids, Member Lecker wants the information soonest. So, if we can action that, please.
Will do, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, members. Have a fantastic day. The meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you, Chair. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Bye-bye.